Hi, this is Candace Benson, the CEO of Benson Consulting and the proud sponsor of the New Hampshire Tech Alliance Tech Women video series. Our video series is highlighting the stories and impacts of women leaders here in the state of New Hampshire. I have Melissa Florio with me. Melissa, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
So excited to hear from you today. And you have had a very interesting trajectory in your career. Tell us a little bit more about that and what you're kind of excited about today that you're working on.
Sure, absolutely. So I started in human resources many moons ago. I'm not saying how long ago, but many moons.
That's
fair. And so I thought that would be my career path. I thought that I would just continue going up the corporate ladder in human resources. And then our company ended up closing our manufacturing facilities, and I decided to divest with them and get laid off at that time. And then I actually was hired back on to continue closing facilities for the company. So I went from human resources to more of an operations management at that point. And then the next thing I know, my husband, who is a plastics engineer, he was like, can you start doing what you're doing for all these other companies for us and start manufacturing? So I ended up bringing a design engineering firm into the manufacturing world and building us up from that. So that's kind of where I now have landed. And so it's been exciting and just learning all the new tools that we now have at our disposal from AI and in the tech fields, and bringing that into manufacturing and to compete with the challenges that we have, with workforce, et cetera. So.
Absolutely. I mean, that truly is a challenge that we continue to face here sometimes in our state, for sure. Speaking of your teams, so oftentimes we put our teams on projects, we tell them what we need to have them working on, but sometimes they don't always buy in right away. How do you work with teams? Kind of what skill sets do you bring to the table to gain that consensus and get people rowing in the same direction?
Right. I mean, it depends on the project, and it depends on the timeline that you might have, or the flexibility, obviously. Sometimes you just need to say, this is the way it's going to be.
Absolutely.
And you're going to now go and execute. And other times we will sit down at the table and figure out what is everyone's skills, where do they feel comfortable, and then how would they best be able to implement this in their day-to-day activities, and that gets a bit of buy-in from them versus having to push it down their throats and say, this is how it's going to be and you're going to be happy, or there's the door, because that's not how we run our culture at all. We have employees that have been with us now for 15 plus years, and they're valuable skills that we really appreciate, but that they bring to the table every day. So
absolutely. And I think that buy-in piece that you mentioned is so super important. If we want to be successful, we find all the time that the organizations and the leaders that get that buy-in and that consensus, at least, even if you don't, by the way, go in the direction they want you to, right?
Sometimes I feel a little guilty because I do feel like, geez, do they think I just went through this whole motion that I didn't hear them? I did hear them. It's just what was, when we looked at the greater picture, it wasn't going to be a doable action for us. So, but I do feel like then do they feel like I didn't listen to them?
Yeah. Do you share the why sometimes in that case? Because
absolutely. We're pretty transparent. I feel like that's very helpful. We don't have a lot of layers in our company right now, and even before in my other roles, the more you communicate, the better, because then they have information to process the questions that they have. It makes them feel more at ease, and then they can take those answers and then go do their jobs. So as much information as you can, I feel. I mean, there's some things that you don't want to scare them with. Obviously, you don't say, well, I don't think I'm going to make payroll this week.
Right.
But there are things that you want to be able to make sure you convey it to them.
Absolutely. I think it's always the truth, right? That people will make up the story if you don't tell them a story. And oftentimes the story they're creating is much worse than what the reality is. So
true.
If you can share something, I know sometimes organizations are very hesitant to do that, but I like your approach in that, I'm gonna ask you the question and I'm gonna listen. Absolutely. And even if we don't go in that direction, I'm gonna tell you why that is to the extent that I can. So I think that's important.
And I learned that from some of our old operations managers, and they kind of, I think that's part of coaching your staff, is teaching them those skills so that they know where the boundaries are, how to communicate, how to act and perform in the workplace, because you don't learn that in high school or college, so.
No, and I love that you say that, because a lot of organizations also don't recognize the need for that training and that coaching. They think, well, you're really good at your job, so we'll just put you in charge of other people to do that job. And that is not the same skill set.
100%. In human resources, there was so many times we would promote an engineer into an engineering manager role, and they'd be like, I can't, we're not successful, and it wasn't fair to them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So shifting gears a little bit, can you tell me a story or a time where you have noticed that your own personal vulnerability or something that you've brought to the table and told kind of your story has helped influence your team?
Sure. I think the biggest one for me was when we were closing the big company that I worked for. Everyone assumed that I was taking a new role with the company and staying with the company. They didn't realize that I actually opted to be let go with all of them. Okay. And once that was shared and they actually knew that I was one of them, it completely changed, and their trust was back with me again. And then I was able to work with them and help them place them into companies and work with their emotions and and just the whole trauma of being with a company for so long. And even when I went and continued on doing the same exact role as a consultant, when people heard that I actually was let go, I'd gone through that. I had been called into a room and told, sorry, we're reducing the whole entire operations. They were able to trust that, oh, you get it, you understand what we're going through, you understand the turmoil that our families are now going to be thrown into. So it really helps when you're as honest as possible with your teams. I mean, you don't need to tell them everything. There needs to be some kind of
yes, you have some barrier.
They don't need to know everything, but the more they know, even when I was like helping my dad with his cancer and having to deal with managing the company and having to take my dad to his treatments every day, when I told that to the employees, like, I might not be available.
Absolutely.
I might not be 100% here for you, and this is why.
Right.
And so, having, they don't need to know all the details, but having some context of why you might not be at your 100% or you might not be giving them the attention or time that you normally would have is very helpful to them.
And I think that is such an important change or shift in leadership.
Yeah.
That used to be that would be seen as a weakness if you were to share things like that, or that people didn't need to know where you were. I mean, even when I was starting in my consulting career, I was often told, you don't tell the client if you have to be at the doctor's office, you don't tell anybody anything, you just keep it. But now I think people almost expect that, and like you said, they trust you more when you're willing to share just enough details so they understand you're human, and you also go through things, and so you understand when they need to.
Exactly.
And they need that same amount of.
And it's shifted my management style. Back in the day, you would be more like not forgiving. Someone would have an issue that would come up, and you would say, I don't care, get to work. You're supposed to be at work. Now, fast forward years later, you realize people have lives.
Right.
Men and women have moms and dads and children and their selves, and things happen. And when you can give that compassion, there's more loyalty to you as a person and to a company, because you understand that this is not just your everything. You're not living for this job. You're living for your family and your life as well outside of work. So I think having that revelation really helps your leadership style.
That's definitely the case.
Yeah.
So last question, and sort of segueing off of that, I don't always love that word balance. I don't know that we have balance in our lives, but you just mentioned you have to sometimes be aware that people are balancing both work life and running a household and children and volunteer activities and community and parents and all of those things. Is there anything about the way that we as women lead that you see kind of we bring to the table in that space to get things done that way?
Yeah, and I think it's a pro and a con. Women are very adept at multitasking. We have a million tabs open in our heads at any time, and we're able to manage, okay, this is where I am now, but this is where I need to be later, and this is where I need to be tomorrow, and this is what needs to be either your elder parent or an employee, and that's a really great skill, but at the same time, it can be tiring on a female. So you also have to know when to pause and say, okay, what should I be doing? Where do I best need to be directing my attention and efforts at this time, and let the rest lie. And I think that's why men can learn from women's brains and women can learn from men. There's so much that we can take from each other, like, hey, that just rolled off their shoulders. Maybe I should let that roll off my shoulders
Right.
too, and see how that feels.
Right.
And then you're like, wow, that was actually felt really good. You know,
Not caring
obsessing
so much
on
about
it.
that.
Yeah, exactly.
Not overthinking that to the nth degree
Yeah.
7 times. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, everyone brings different things to the table, and I think that's part of your leadership too, is like looking at the men and women that come into your team and seeing who has what, and you know, championing that for them so that they're successful, and then it makes your life a heck of a lot easier.
Absolutely.
You know, it really does, because you can't be everything, you know, and so yeah.
That's great. No, and that's great advice, I think, for all of us
Yeah.
to continue to think about, right?
Right.
And looking at maybe what works well for others too, and men or women, and what can we leverage in the way that we're leading
Yeah.
and performing in our organizations as well. So
Absolutely.
great. Well, thank you so much, Melissa.
Thank
This was
you.
wonderful. So great to have you here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.